Hello, in this video we will talk about the ExactFlat options. In ExactFlat, options can be configured using both command line options and the ExactFlat options panel. This video will focus on the ExactFlat options panel, and full explanations of all the options can be found in the ExactFlat for Rhino product user and training guide. To open the ExactFlat options panel, we click the cog icon in the ExactFlat Tools toolbar. ExactFlat options are broken down into 6 different categories. We have general options to ExactFlat, we have options for about the highlights of ExactFlat, we have DXF export options, we have options to configure the legend used to display the false color strain analysis, we have localization options, and we have options to control how product updates are reported to you. Starting with the general ExactFlat options, we have options for controlling flattening, sewing, optimization or spring, and how cuts are handled during deletion. When we look at the flattening options, the first option is auto mend on fracture. This option, when turned on, will cause the fracture algorithm to heal all cuts between individual triangles during fracturing. When the fracture pre-flattener is used, it will explode the pattern piece into individual triangles and lay them down one at a time until a flat pattern has been achieved. When auto mend is turned on, it will then heal all the cuts between those triangles to create the final pattern piece. Otherwise, your pattern piece will be exploded into many different triangles. It is recommended to always leave this option turned on, since exploding your pattern piece into many triangles is not very useful. Score and isoseams option will mend all automatic cuts on a pattern piece that do not fully cut the piece in half during pre-flattening. This includes all of our pre-flatteners such as fracture, pelt, convex combination maps, and the initial EF flatten command. The maximum tangential angle affects the way the sewing phase of flattening works. During sewing, two edges are considered for sewing by measuring the angle between the two edges. If the angle between the two edges is less than the maximum tangential angle, then the edge is discarded as a candidate for sewing and will instead have no cut placed between it. Also during the sewing phase of the flattening algorithm, when considering edges for sewing, the maximum dihedral angle indicates the maximum allowed angle between two triangle faces for them to be sewn together. If the angle between two triangle faces is greater than the maximum dihedral angle, then the edge in question will be discarded and will not be sewn together. Lastly, the maximum merge percentage is also a way of disqualifying two edges as candidates for sewing during the sewing phase of the flattening algorithm. If the projection of the two edges is beyond 10%, then those two edges are discarded as a candidate and the two edges will not be sewn together. When optimizing, the default material assigned to the optimizer, or pre-selected when the optimizer is run, can be changed by changing the default material by clicking the button here. This will open a dialog very similar to what is seen when selecting material during optimizing, and allows you to select a default material and metric to be used or pre-selected whenever the optimize command is run. Lastly, we come to our cut options. The auto position on mend option only affects the mend command. When turned on, the mend piece will be auto-rotated and translated to a best fit position alongside the anchor piece. The auto position on delete command affects only the EF delete cut command. When turned on, the neighboring pattern piece to the selected edge will be auto-rotated and translated to a best fit position along the selected cut to be deleted. Finally, the auto full mend on delete command only affects the EF delete cut command when used on an automatic cut. When turned on, all automatic cuts between the selected edge and the neighboring pattern piece will be deleted, not just the selected cut. The ExactFlat highlights option allows you to customize the thickness of the highlights as well as the color of all the highlights. In ExactFlat, most of these highlights can be turned on and off by selecting the ExactFlat highlights toolbar. The automatic cut highlights controls the color and thickness of the line used to highlight an automatic cut that's being selected. Similarly, when selecting a manual cut, the highlight, color, and thickness can be changed here. The endpoints, when selecting an endpoint of an automatic or a manual cut, can also be customized by changing the manual end cut, color, and thickness. When displaying flipped triangles on a pattern, we can change the thickness of the inset triangles as well as the color of the inset triangles and the cross. Rainbows are used to help identify neighboring pattern pieces, and the thickness of the highlight and color can also be changed. Split points are created using either the split point command or by inserting piece tags or notch tags on an edge or a triangle face. The highlight used to identify the split point can be changed in terms of thickness, color, and the radius from which the highlight emanates from the split point. The grain line can also be changed in this options panel as well. When performing different commands such as deleting cuts or selecting vertices for manipulation, highlight is used to indicate the vertex or edge that is being selected. We can adjust the color and size of the highlights used to indicate the selected edge or vertex in the ExactFlat highlights options menu. Similarly, we can also select the mouse over color for manual cuts, automatic cuts, and manual end cuts. Lastly, we can change the font used to represent tags, both piece tags and notch tags, in this menu as well. Moving on to DXF export, we can change the behavior of the way DXFs are created by changing these options in the ExactFlat menu. The edge type refers to the type of DXF entities used to create the edges, both cut edges and seam edges in the ExactFlat DXF. We have a number of different options here, with the default being polylines. A polyline output works extremely well for AccuMark and will produce polylines to represent all the cut edges and seam edges. For some customers, they prefer to see a more smooth curve profile in the DXF. So to accommodate these, we have both splines and lines and arcs and lines options. These will interpolate splines through the cut edges and so on seam edges and insert spline entities instead of polylines. Lastly, we can export lines only for the DXF for other users who prefer to have this option. The arc and spline tolerances are only available when using arcs and lines and splines and lines, and these help define the tightness and tolerance of the splines and the arcs. These are auto-calculated and are not really available for editing, but they're displayed here for information purposes only. Because ExactFlat pattern perimeters can contain different information with respect to where neighboring pattern piece cuts end and start, we have some options for helping to control the divide of the lines. So instead of having just one single curve for the entire perimeter of the pattern piece, we can divide this perimeter based off a couple different criteria. The first one allows us to split the curve at manual cut endpoints. So if a manual cut has been used to split a pattern piece in half, the start and stop point of the manual cut will be considered endpoints or split points for the perimeter piece of the pattern piece. We can also split at twin transitions, and what this means is on one example would be we have a single piece on the right that sews to two different pieces on the left. So one cut on the right sews to two different cuts on the left. When splitting at a twin transition, the right hand piece will have a split inserted where the two pieces on the left join that piece. So this is just a way of helping to delineate different cuts for sewing purposes. When splitting using an automatic break angle, all edges in the DXF will be compared to one another. For any edge where the angle between the two edges is greater than the automatic break angle, a split point will be inserted at that edge, splitting the perimeter at that point. Finally, we can adjust the seam allowance used when creating a DXF by changing the seam allowance option. It is important to note that both the DXF seam allowance and text size are both represented in model units. So we can easily see the model units down here highlighted in the Rhino toolbar. So if this, right now we're setting this to 1/4 centimeter. If our model units were set to inches, this would be 1/4 inch. If this was set to meters, this would be 1/4 meter or 25 centimeters. Moving on to the Legend tab. From this, in this options panel, we can control the values and colors for our false color strain analysis. The default Legend uses the color black for anything beyond half a percentage point of sag. The color white is used to represent 0% strain. The color cyan is used to represent 5% strain. Green is used to represent 10% strain. Yellow is 15% strain. And red is 20% strain or more. We can remove any of these values and we can insert any new value that we want, and we can also adjust the percentage or strain value and color of these different points. We can also see a live preview of the strain analysis using the preview window. We can also adjust the language of all the text in ExactFlat by changing the localization. By default, ExactFlat is going to choose the localization that best fits the current Rhino settings. However, you can turn this off and manually select a language to use with ExactFlat. If you've installed all the different localizations, then you will be able to select them from a list, or if you've created your own, it will appear in the list as well. By default, ExactFlat comes localized in English, French, Italian, Spanish, and German. The last configuration option in the ExactFlat options panel are the update notifications. When turned on, ExactFlat will automatically check for a newer version of the plugin, and if found, it will prompt you with a message saying a newer version is available, as well as the new features in the new version. We can optionally turn on the check for beta updates, and when this is turned on, if any beta updates have been released, then you will be notified of those as well. And this concludes our video. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at support@exactflat.com. Thank you and have a good day.